of For the Love of Marketing. I'm Namrata, that is Simon, and today we'll be talking about mental health issues and how mental health is affected by social media and uh, the digital innovations that keep happening every day. And before we begin, a trigger warning: if topics of mental health disturb you or trigger you in any manner, so please skip this interview. And and another preface that we are not mental health experts. We are just discussing about how social media, the digital landscape affects us as humans, and we are just trying to bring out the message that you're not alone. It happens with everyone, and it can be tough, and there are ways to get out of this. And yeah, so hi Simon, how are you?
Hi. I'm good, thank you. I'm really good. It's another Friday morning, so looking forward to the weekend. But I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good. I just had a lot of fruits, juicy fruits for the summer, so
Nice.
I'm very happy about that.
Lovely.
So yeah, I will just begin with my first question, and it is like, in general, how does the digital ecosystem, like all these digital tools and technologies that we use on the daily, affect our mental health? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question, and it's one that receives so much attention. And like you said, we're not mental health experts, and by no means do I want anyone to take anything I say in this session as sort of some kind of prescriptive advice. But I think mental health is something that's received a lot of attention. It's something I've actually been quite passionate about for a long time. There's a charity in the UK that I often support called Mind, which does some great work in this space. And I think it's an area that years ago when I first started supporting Mind, which was probably 20 odd years ago, it didn't get anywhere near enough attention, and it was very clearly an issue. I think it gets a lot more attention today, which is great. It's really good to see that. It was dismissed a lot in the 20th century, as if you've got mental health issues, you're being sort of weak in some way, which is absolute nonsense. Of course, we all as humans have different things to juggle and balance, and some of those can be incredibly difficult, whether it's financial strains or family relationship strains, or there's all sorts of things that can cause difficulty. So it's great that that's getting much more attention now, and I think with digital marketing specifically, and with the sort of the digital world that we live in, one of the biggest difficulties is the sort of always on culture, the sort of FOMO culture that we have. We know the fear of missing out. We don't want to be the last one to a trend. We want to be on it all the time. If our friends post something, we want to see it, react to it, and from a work perspective, obviously there's so many channels which are fantastic for running a business, like Slack, for example, which is great, instant communication, really great way of running a business, but it can be difficult to switch off from. Of course, it's got tools to do that, but in the evening it's very tempting, if you're in an international role, to nip in and go, what's going on in the States, and in the morning, what's going on in Asia, and from a UK perspective, obviously. So it's it's something that can be difficult to switch off from, and that's one of the challenges. The human brain is not designed to work 24/7. Some people will be comfortable doing that, but it's not really the way it's designed. It's really designed to have peaks of activity and troughs for relaxation. Hence why we sleep. And if we go back to the early days of humanity, it's chase an animal and then relax, recuperate, right? That's the extent of my prehistoric knowledge. But I think that's the issue that we have, is the lack of turning off. And then I think that, combined with some of the elements of social media, where people are being presented with a life that they aspire to and they can't reach, can cause a lot of mental health issues. Of course, Instagram gets a lot of criticism for that. There are a lot of sort of travel Instagrammers who are having this wonderful time going around on luxury yachts all over the world, and I think people get very jealous of that and struggle with that, understandably. and you see other people's really polished lives, and you think, why isn't my life that polished? And often what you're seeing is not true at all. It's set up for social media. In the same way, you could look at the old modeling culture, or the Hollywood culture, and you can see the actors and the models in their magazines and things, and think, wow, they're so perfect and polished. But there's airbrushing, and there's 100 takes for that scene that you didn't see, and you don't know what's going on with their life. Maybe they have a mansion, but who knows what's going on in their life, right? It might not be all happy. So I think there's a lot of issues around turning off, around so much access to technology, and around the creation of sort of images and aspirations that can be difficult to take. I think the important thing is that we recognize that, and we take some steps as a society and as individuals to try and support people through those difficult times. And there are plenty of things you can do. So lots going on. I mean, that's just scraping the surface. Obviously there's a whole list of things, but it's a fascinating area, and something that I think we, as digital marketers, as business leaders, and just as human beings, all need to appreciate and support people in society on as much as we can.
Yeah, being on social media can be very, very difficult, and when you're not very aware of the reality, like what goes on behind the scenes, it can be all the more scary. Like, you start to imagine everything is very real, which it is not. And other than that, it is also very addictive. Once you start using social media, you cannot really stop. And recently, like, as marketers, we have to be on our phones, we have to be up to date on social media, on so many different channels, and sometimes it leaks out of our professional life to personal life, where we are using it, social media and all these channels all the time. So it's kind of an addiction. So what tips would you like to give? Like, what tips, like, what can we do to not be so addicted to it all the time? How do we compartmentalize?
Yeah, it's important to draw some lines. I mean, I think I'm going to challenge one thing you said there, which is, once you get started on social media, you can't stop. I think that's I think for some people that can be an absolute challenge, but I think you can stop. You can always stop, and that's important to remember, that you don't have to keep going back to social media to see what's going on. But you're right, as digital marketers, it's very difficult, right? Because we many of us will be heavily involved in social media in our day-to-day. Not everyone in digital marketing, of course. There are lots of different roles in digital marketing, but many people will, through, whether it's through advertising or content, or just general branding strategy, all sorts of things. So especially at the small business level, where you're juggling so many different pieces. But yeah, look, I think the key is to draw a line, as a digital marketing professional, draw a line between what you do during the day and what you do in the evening. I was talking to someone just yesterday who was saying that they don't, they have a colleague who doesn't like to make decisions outside of work, as they have so many decisions to make in work, that when it comes to outside of work, they like things to be as automated and set up as possible, so as that's their relaxing time, and they don't have to stress anymore. I'm in the opposite world, is that I like to make decisions outside of work time, because those are personal decisions, and I'm making some decisions about things to do with my life rather than things to do with my job, which is nice. I like to be able to do that. So people have different considerations, but I think it's the same with social media, in that there will be people who like to be able to still be involved in social media in their personal time. But they have to make sure that there's a clear line, right? This is my social media channel. I'm talking to my friends about my interests and my passions. This is not me then sneaking off and just having a quick look at the corporate channel and making sure everything's running, right? Separate your notifications, separate your apps, separate your accounts, and separate the times as well, right? It's important to be able to switch on and off. Like I said earlier, it's very easy to be in this sort of 24/7 working cycle, but I think you have to draw hard lines, especially now that many of us are working remotely. That's obviously changed significantly since COVID. It's harder to draw those lines, right? So the way you would get up in the morning, get in your car, on your train, on your bike, whatever you're going to do, go into the office, do your 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever it is in the office, then get back on your bike, car, train, go home, and that's your personal time. Now, often you wake up in the morning and where is the line between starting work and having breakfast? Are you having breakfast whilst you work, or you don't commute anymore? You're not in a separate office, so where is that line? It's harder to draw, and I think people find themselves drifting in and out of things. You might use the same machine for personal computer work and for business computer work. So then, of course, you're doing something in the evening for yourself. And you'll just flick in and have an email notification pops up. Let me go and quickly check that. So, I think it's difficult to draw those lines. So with social media, you have to draw some lines and say, this is what I'm doing for myself. This is personal. This is not work. I'm not going to get in any notifications. I'm not going to look at any of that. This is just about enjoyment and fun and relaxation and personal time. I think that's really critical to getting over it. And just remember to stop, right? You can get reminders as well, of course, on screen time. I think those can be helpful if you're finding you've got an addiction to staring at things on your phone. Then get yourself some reminders. I think it's helpful to switch off screens like an hour before bed as well, to help your brain sort of just relax. If you don't do that, it can be difficult to get a good night's sleep. So I think that's a good thing to do. So setting up some schedules for yourself and drawing those lines is probably the best advice I can give.
And I think turning off notifications also helps a lot, like have them triggered for a certain time when you're working or something like that.
Yeah, do not disturb modes and away from computer modes and things like that are really important. And I think my personal view is any business that is asking you to pick up all the notifications outside of your working hours is not a business you should be working for. I think that's really disrespectful and naive for companies to be expecting people to work 24/7. People work when they work, and if you as a person run a business and you want to work 24/7, good for you. If your staff want to put in extra hours, great, that's very kind of them. But having an expectation that they pick things up in the evening is not right. So employees being able to switch off, and that's not just specific to social media, by the way, just being able to switch off anything, right? I mean, just be able to turn off work and go on to personal life is really, really critical. So I think if you're working for a company who's saying, okay, you work 9 till 5, but in the evenings you still need to pick up any social media things and comment on this and respond to these emails if I message you, that's not on. That's not on today. I just don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, that's true. That shouldn't.
Although I know you often work into the evening now, so thank you very much. But you don't have to, and you know that.
Yeah. I think right now in my life, I have the time to work like after my working hours. I don't have such responsibilities where I'm stuck, where I have to totally restrict myself. So that helps sometimes. Yeah. But other than being addicted to social media, there's new phenomenon coming on in the digital landscape is Metaverse. And scientists are saying that it's going to be all the more addictive, and that can be good or bad. I don't know what kind of addiction would it be. Would it be good or bad? And it would be immersive, so it would be many folds. So what are your thoughts on that? Like how would Metaverse change the game?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, what's the Metaverse going to become? I don't know. It could go in so many different directions here. In the same way, virtual reality is sort of bounced around in lots of different directions over the last, 30 years. But look, I think it's difficult to tell. However, if it goes down the direction of travel, sort of similar to a Star Trek holosuite, if anyone knows what I mean by that, and I'm sure some people will. Then of course that has huge potential to be addictive. I mean, so some of the most addictive sort of games and experiences are the ones where you are really immersed in the game, where you are the experience is happening all around you. There's lots of things you can do. It's quite free and open. You can wander around and interact with lots of different things. Those sort of platforms, environments are quite addictive, quite difficult to switch off from. Right? You can lose hours in environments like that. So if the Metaverse takes that direction, I can certainly see it being a significant mental health risk, because I think people will sort of go in there and do what they do. interacting with people and living out fantasies and passions on a luxury yacht, or starting their own business, or whatever it is that they can do in the metaverse, or just trading, or you can live out so many different possibilities in there. And if that has the ability to create a life that you would ideally want and can't create, or don't want to create ideally in your personal life, then that's great in terms of I can live out a passion of mine here without it affecting my personal life, but also incredibly dangerous, because you're going to want to go in there and live out that passion all the time. So I think there's a huge risk, and I think those that are heavily involved in the metaverse need to think very, very carefully about mental health. I would strongly recommend anyone building anything for the metaverse that has an effect on the actual experience to consider mental health, and perhaps even speak to mental health professionals, or even bring a mental health professional onto the team if it's a significant project, because if this is truly going to be immersive, that's really exciting, but also really dangerous. So I think we need to tread very carefully. I suspect in some areas we won't. I suspect some things we will just, as a society and as an industry, create, and we will have to navigate that. But I think as a society that has created many mental health issues through the digital platforms and systems and processes that we've created, I hope that we've learned something from that, and we can take careful steps with this. But I suspect we won't. So I think mental health professionals need to be also thinking about that, thinking about the metaverse and what it could mean as well for society. I genuinely, we've had so many discussions around the metaverse. I genuinely don't know where it's going to go over the next 5, 10, 20 years. But like I say, if it goes down that route, then there are going to be issues. And I think considering mental health as part of the build should be intrinsic to what they do.
Yeah, we should proceed with caution, I think. Before logging into Metaverse, we mentally prepare that it's going to be not easy to quit it. So I was researching on mental health and all different sorts of things, and I came across this terminology, right brain marketing and left brain marketing, which intrigued me a lot. It is something that I don't think is talked about enough, and it's a very interesting topic. And so we are talking on brains, so I thought this is also something that we could touch. So what is right brain marketing? What is left brain marketing? What is this?
It depends who you talk to in terms of how often it's talked about. Some people talk about this all the time. It's certainly something that's come up many, many times in my career. But ultimately, it's not necessarily about marketing, the right brain, left brain thing. It's a psychological point. They talk about how the right brain controls the more creative side, and the left brain controls the more analytical side of your mind. Even in psychology, obviously this is a big part of psychology, but when it comes to body language, I remember having a session with a psychologist, long time ago. This was when the TV show Big Brother was quite new. I think it was in maybe its second or third season. And he was the psychologist from the first season of Big Brother. Now, the first season of Big Brother was quite psychology focused. It was this is an experiment of putting a bunch of people together, locking them in a room with some tasks and seeing what happens. It later became just a big sort of entertainment piece, less about the psychology. But he was a absolutely fascinating guy, and he really sort of turned me on to psychology in marketing, got me thinking a lot more about it. And I think it's an area I talk a lot about now. It's quite a passion project for me, psychology and marketing. So I think that within body language you have you can tell if someone's lying because they are looking. I think if I get this right, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but they're looking up and to the left, which means they're accessing the right side of their brain, which means they're being creative. So if they're being creative, then they're not trying to remember, they're making something up, and therefore they're lying. So there's little great, fantastic body language tips and things like that, which I probably just got completely wrong, but it's along those lines, right? So the right left brain thing is fascinating. Now, you know, there are people who very obviously are right or left brain leaning in terms of this terminology. So people who are very obviously incredibly creative, but really struggle with numbers. And there are people who are obviously very analytical, and they can't draw a picture or come up with an idea to save their lives. And that's fine, right? And everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses, and that's great. And you know, in any good business, in any good department, you need a real mix of different people to make it highly successful. You don't want a bunch of people that all look the same by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly not ones that look like you as a leader. So yeah, you need a mix. However, you know, in marketing, what's increasingly happening because of the digital marketing world is that everything is really becoming a mix of both. I think we did a post on social media that got quite a few shares recently around how a marketer has to be, you know, a psychologist and an analyst and an artist, and, you know, a big list of things. And it's true. It's yeah, that's not a sort of blowing smoke thing. It's genuinely true that we have to juggle a lot of different skill sets and thoughts within marketing today. And you know, so if you break it down to sort of the jobs, you know, as a social media manager, you need to be creative to come up with really great ideas that are going to punch through the noise, because there's a lot going on social media. That's going to be unique, interesting, funny, creative. But at the same time, you then need to go and analyze those results and say, okay, so I sent that message out with that style of design at that time of day on that channel versus this message I sent out with this design, and how do I tell whether, you know, which one got more engagement and why, and how do I analyze that to improve my social media over time? How do I look at the insights dashboards to tell me what I'm doing, what my competitors are doing, what's working, what's not? So you know, there's an analytical side to that as well. And you can't just go out and, you know, every business hire a creative social media manager and an analytical social media manager. That doesn't work. So yeah, that in that sense, a social media person has to be both creative and analytical. But even when you go right all the way over to the pure creative side of design, you know, ideally that design is about both as well. Now, in this situation, you might want two different roles, but a designer who's creating a video or producing an infographic or just a social media design or an advert or something doesn't necessarily have to follow it through and analyze the results, but the results have to be analyzed. And it's not just a question of, you know, I made this one red because I think red's nice, or that's our brand color, so I just shoved that in there and they're always going to be that color. You know, you have to understand that, again, psychology of color is an interesting one, but you've got to test that. You've got to say, let's put advert A against advert B and find out what works and why. Is it because we tweak the messaging? Is it because we tweak the timing? Is it because we tweak the audience? So, you know, the creative itself has an effect, and that could be because the picture you've used is positive, because the picture you've used is negative, because it's bright, because it's dark, because it's relevant to that audience, because it's not. There are thousands and thousands of different reasons that a creative can work. So, you know, you think of creative as a right brain thing, but it also has to have a left brain element to it in the digital world. So, you know, right brain, left brain is fascinating. Obviously, some people are, I would say most people are a mix of both, probably leaning slightly more to one side or the other. And you know, really the people who are amazing at their jobs are normally more very heavily weighted towards right or left in their specific job, but you know, being a blend of both is helpful. So, you know, if you are a creative marketer or a creative person anyway, I would recommend understanding the analytical side a little. You don't have to do it, you don't have to do that as a job, but appreciating the analysis and the data crunching and the insights that come from the creative that you create. And likewise on the analytical side, understand, you know, what the process is for being creative. How do they do that? How do they, you won't necessarily ever be able to get there, because creative is one of those things that I think is really hard to learn. But if it's possible at all, but understanding that process and respecting people who go through that is the key. So really it's one of my sit on the fence answers, where, you know, you need both. And there's no right and wrong in it by any stretch of the imagination. There's no right and left in it, I should say, shouldn't I? But yeah, that I think it's a fascinating area within marketing, and something that I think everyone should try and, no matter what side of the fence they are more comfortable on, get out of your comfort zone and try and learn about the other side.
So which side does your brain lean towards, right or left?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm probably one of those somewhere in the middle people. I mean, I'm fairly creative. I mean, as you know, I paint terrible paintings, and I draw fairly well, and I do theatre and music and stuff. So I'm quite creative in that way. But I do love a good spreadsheet. I do love a good database. I do love to data crunch and understand what's going on and why, and tweak the numbers and test and learn. And I used to be a bit of a programmer 20 years ago. Definitely not anymore. But I have probably both sides. But I'm not a creative. If you put my drawings next to a really great creative, they're just embarrassing, to be honest with you. My analytical skills are pretty good, but you put me up against a serious mathematician, and again, it's going to be embarrassing. So I'm your typical jack of all trades. I can do a bunch of things pretty well, but I'm no expert in most.
Yeah, personally for me, my left brain has a lot of potential, but I'd rather not use it. I'm happy with my right brain functioning. So like in India, especially, and Asia, being good at analytics and maths is applauded, and being, left-brained is it's the desired thing in a child growing up, and always it's like, you should be good at all those things. So do you think that people who use their right brains more in marketing or their left brains more in marketing are at some kind of disadvantage? Or it's a
No, I don't think there's just disadvantage. I think it depends on the role and what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I've worked with people whose roles are pure design, and they're not interested in the analytics. Now, like I say, I think it's good for them to challenge themselves and understand the data and how it's being used, but certainly it's not a disadvantage for them not to do that if they're working within a team of people who are briefing that creative in very well, understand what they need, how they're going to test it, and are doing the analysis. I think that's absolutely fine. And those people have been phenomenal designers. I've worked with some really, really talented creative people down the years, and same on the analytical side, people who just have absolutely no interest in coming up with creative ideas or campaign ideas or visual concepts or anything, but they are incredibly talented at planning and number crunching, and really analytical guys, and they've been the difference between the success and failure of a campaign many times. So I've worked with people on both ends of the scale, and of course a lot of people in the middle. So I don't think there's a disadvantage as such to being right or left brain focused. I think like I say, I think it helps to try and challenge yourself and move out of your comfort zone, because it can only make you better, right? It can only improve you. So I think why not? If you're a great artist, great at creating beautiful illustrations, understand what people are doing with them, right? And how that can help you improve. So I think no, I don't think it's, and there is no one size fits all. As I said, we're not looking as an industry or as a people to try and make everyone the same. That's the last thing we want, right? Diversity is essential to success. I mean, even if you just go back to pure nature, right? Diversity is essential to success. So I'm not sure if that's something Darwin said, probably not, but it's probably along those lines. So we need diversity to succeed, and that's critical in every way. So whatever people's skills are, that's great, and there are always places to use people's skills. There are always phenomenal jobs for every person out there, and then everyone has their own talents. But my point is that don't rest on that. If you can challenge yourself, learn new skills, and expand beyond your comfort zone, it's usually a good thing.
Yeah, I think using both sides would be a lottery for people, but you got to do the best with what you've got end of the day, and keep expanding on it. So thank you so much, Simon, for speaking with me, and it was lovely. And we'll see you all the next week.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Cheers.
Goodbye.